What's going on, guys? Sorry about the technical difficulties here. Apparently, Skype is causing a lot of problems and just hates roto grinders or something along those lines. So, we are doing another Grinders Live old school. I, of course, am Peter. Go by CSU Ram 88 in the industry, and I am joined today by Justin. How are we doing today, man?
Doing pretty good. Before we get too deep into the show, just want to send good luck wishes to our good buddy Ethan Haskell, who's worked at Roto Grinders for 2 years, is going to be leaving. I believe today is his last day, and going to work for DraftKings. So if you follow him on Twitter or something, send him a shout out. It's been great working with him over the past year or so. Very good with the technical tools and the Excel spreadsheets and all that behind the scenes. So he's going to be missed here at Roto Grinders, but definitely a good hire for DraftKings and a nice guy in the industry. So all the best to him.
Yeah, sorry I had the show running there twice while you were talking there, but totally on the same page with you, with Ethan. Big fan of his, always have been. We've gone back a long time. I've known him for quite some time in the industry. He's always been a person who's been all about the industry. So glad he landed on his feet. He's out there in Boston. Certainly appreciate all the work that he's done here at Roto Grinders, and still hope to be on the same basketball team as him in some of these Roto Grinders games. So good luck to Ethan, and a couple other real quick things industry-wide, and then I want to kind of have one other conversation, not relative to the picks night. We'll go down that in just a second. But I just got back from San Francisco from the Fantasy Sports Trade Association conference, and just so you guys know, I've been to all these conferences for the last 2-3 years now, and I think this is the time I was most excited about it because daily fantasy is really starting to get its rightful credit, and I think people are really starting to believe in what's happening here in the space within the community. So Roto Grinders is obviously a big part of that. You guys playing is a big part of that, and it's just exciting to see the growth of this industry. So one other cool comment real quick, and then I got a question for you, Justin. For you guys, I'm a beer guy, and this is my favorite beer in the entire world. This is Lawfully Sour Brown Ale from Fort Collins. That's the town that I went to school in for CSU, and I'm so pumped they actually have it out right now. So for any beer connoisseurs, that is definitively my favorite beer. It's an amazing brown sour, and I'm enjoying a nice Friday drinking it today. So that's my last comment there. Justin, I know you made a post recently here, and I think there's a lot of good stuff there, and I first want to basically commend you on being willing to make that post and being as honest as you were. And one thing, just from working with you from a personal standpoint, because I haven't commented on the thread, I don't think there's anyone who is more authentic in the community than you. I think you're someone who wears their heart on their sleeve. I know people have said that, but you really do, and you really do care about the rest of the community. But the reason I want to talk about it, I mean, everyone can read on the forums, but I do want to talk about it because I think there's a lot of value in taking breaks and just making sure you kind of understand where you are mentally and where you need to be, especially if you have other things going on in your life. I certainly had to take a break last summer when I was transitioning into working at Star Street full-time. I just couldn't handle the responsibility of doing both things full-time, so I can certainly relate, and definitely just kind of want to hear your thoughts on that, because I know you posted a pretty heartfelt response there in the thread, and there's been a lot of good stuff there. So give us a little bit of an explanation on that, and then we can move forward to the picks.
Yeah, I really appreciate anyone who took the time to comment in there. And basically what it boiled down to was, especially this year's MLB season, I had such a solid start that I really ramped up my play a lot, kind of more than I ever have before. And baseball's a grind with the everyday thing. With a sport like football, it's pretty easy to ramp up your play, and you get, even if you play college and pro football, basically you're looking at Saturday and Sunday making lineups and stuff, maybe some research Friday night, and then the rest of the week you can kind of kick back. And that really makes it a little bit easier on you. But if you're playing, high volume night in and night out, it takes a toll on you because there's highs when you're doing really well and there's lows when you're not doing very well. And my wife and I are closing on a new house purchase next month. That's part of the factors involved with this. I liquidated some funds in my DFS accounts for that, and then we're actually putting our current house on the market. We're having a big rummage sale tomorrow to try to get rid of some crap that we've accumulated over the last 6 or 7 years. We've basically outgrown this place that we're in now. And I just found myself getting either, I don't know, just tired. It's hard to explain until you actually get there, but I found myself enjoying baseball a little bit less, and being a little more grumpy from time to time. So for the first time, it really hit me. I knew, it's time where I need to step back for, I don't know how long, a couple of weeks, maybe. It just depends. I put like 2 tournament teams in last night. That's all I did. And I really didn't feel the need to, kind of be following along with it all night. And, I had a nice night with the family. And it's good to do that from time to time. It's the first time I've done it this baseball season. And I didn't want people to be thinking, where'd he go and all that, because that sort of stuff, when Brett Favre disappeared for a year or whatever. Since I'm such a big part of this community, I figured I'd let everybody know that that's what I was going to do for a little bit. And hopefully come back, mentally refreshed. I don't want to be exhausted for the start of football season, especially college football. I know you're big into that too. When that gets here, I want to be refreshed and ready to go. So I'll still be around playing, just not, for the heavy volume that I've been doing for most of baseball season. Just going to refresh a little bit, get ready to sell our house hopefully, and move into a new place next month. So it's going to be a busy summer, and I'm sure the break will fly by quickly. So.
Yeah, no, totally, and I can completely relate. I play quite a bit of volume myself, and obviously, I really pride myself on trying to take the emotion out of it, but as much as I say that, it's still hard to do, so certainly can relate to you there. And then in addition to that, I think the break thing is just really, really valuable. We're in a time of the year where it's kind of the dog days of baseball anyways, and it really does become a grind, like you said. And it's important to be mentally focused and have the energy for it. I mean, I personally don't know how you do it, man, given that you have a family, kids, your full-time job as an accountant. I mean, you have just so much going on. And to be mentally sharp and have the energy for it is just challenging. And doing it every day is just something that's something that can eat you up, So I totally relate there. And one other person I think is really interesting that kind of relates to what you're doing too. Candia takes baseball pretty much completely off. Yeah. And obviously that might not be his favorite sport, but I can just tell you, I mean, I grind this stuff full time too and play, probably 330, 340 days out of the year, play pretty much every day, and it will eat at you. And I need to take days off. I took a day off yesterday because I had a presentation yesterday up at CU, and it worked out well. I had a great day. It was beautiful here in Colorado, and it was just kind of mentally refreshing. And I know Candia takes this time off to kind of get back in the groove, and I certainly think it makes sense. If you're just not in the zone or if you're not feeling like you have the energy, I think this is applicable to anyone. I think it never hurts to take a couple days off or weeks off or months off or whatever it is, just to get kind of back into it. And for you in particular, I think the timing is really good just because, like you said, where the dog days of summer, it's really a grind, and then you'll be in a really good spot mentally, hopefully, come the start of football, end of baseball, college football, and all that stuff, because that's when daily fantasy becomes even more time-consuming. So just wanted to get that out there. I know I didn't respond in that thread. I normally try not to get in those threads as much anymore, but I definitely wanted to discuss it. And thank you too, Carge, for always being so genuine and always being authentic with everything you do here at Roto Grinders. So with that, I know we're kind of running late here. We only have 40 minutes left here on the show. We'll try to go as fast as we can. Starting pitch is the first thing I want to talk about, and I'm not going to ask you about the entire position first. I just want to talk to you about Strasburg and Price. I know you're not as much of a fan of Strasburg in general. I mean, obviously you don't totally hate him, but you've always been more on the side of not using him. And I think for me personally, I've been on him all year, but there is the frustration aspect of him throwing limited amounts of pitches. Tonight is interesting because Price is a bigger favorite, but I'm curious your thoughts because Atlanta is really bad versus right-handers and Justin Upton's not in the game. So curious your thoughts on those two first.
Yeah, I think the matchup is definitely interesting for Strasburg tonight. He doesn't have the greatest career stats against the Braves either. And with the Braves striking out as much as they do, I could see him racking up the pitch count tonight. That being said, the upside is clearly there against the Braves. Like you said, struggle against right-handed pitching. They strike out a ton, and Strasburg obviously loves the strikeout. So if you're looking for upside, I think he's a great play tonight. If I was just trying to choose on a single pitcher site, though, for cash games, I'd probably give Price the edge because you basically have the biggest difference in elite pitchers here when it comes to Price and Strasburg. Price is a guy that always pitches in deep into a game. He doesn't walk anybody. He always pitches to contact, not afraid to get a few ground ball outs here and there. But he can also put away the hitters with the strikeout. when he gets ahead in the count. And I think the last time I checked, he led the American League in strikeouts, but yet still manages to pitch deep in the game because he's always throwing first pitch strikes. And he's just very efficient with the way he works. I guess that's probably the best word to describe it. He just faced this Houston team last weekend, gave up 2 homers in the first inning, but rebounded well, pitched 8 innings, gave up 3 runs, and got the win. That's another benefit when it comes to David Price. Tampa Bay's offense hasn't been great, but at home against Houston, against Jared Cosart, hopefully they can give him some support tonight. I think both guys are probably pretty close to equal favorites to get a win at home tonight. But Price, again, those extra couple innings that he tends to pitch, that gives you some more advantages when it comes to trying to obtain a win. So on a site like FanDuel, I think that's a big benefit to David Price. But that being said, I know Strasburg's got the upside tonight. I think he's a really solid play for GPPs. No Justin Upton certainly boosts that a little bit. But I would lean towards Price as a safer play for cash games, and then I like them both for GPPs. I just wish that Strasburg would sometimes get a little more efficient, not go so deep into counts, and then he'd be able to get through 7, 8, 9 innings occasionally, as opposed to very rarely getting past 6.
Yeah, or if what Matt Williams would let him pitch past 88 pitches.
Yeah.
That I hate.
Yeah,
that.
it's strange. I don't know.
So
I mean,
tilting.
they let him do that. They let him do that last weekend against the Cardinals, and frankly, the one time where I thought it might have been okay for them to pull him would have been that game because he didn't have his best stuff last Saturday against the Cardinals. Still ended up with a fairly decent line, but not a line that you would expect from him. I think it was only about 15 DraftKings points, and that's not what you're expecting when you take him. But if you throw that start out, his last 3 starts before that, talking about Strasburg, were very, very good. And, certainly I wouldn't be surprised if he went out there and threw 12 or 13 Ks against the Braves tonight. The only question is, how long is he going to be around? Is he going to get past 6 or 7 innings? And will their offense support him, for him to be able to get a win, which isn't as important on DraftKings. But they've been terrible at giving him run support all year long.
Yeah, and the one thing is the win, I think, is heavily weighted more towards Price than it is Strasburg. Lines actually moved away from Strasburg, which I find interesting in Washington. Started out as about a minus 170 favorite, now he's about a minus 150 favorite, whereas Price, it's actually moving in his favor, minus 180 to minus 200. So I actually like Price more on FanDuel. I think they're pretty similar on DraftKings, our sponsor, where the win doesn't matter as much. I think both of them are in great spots. Both have a ton of upside. I don't mind either for cash games, but where the win's more important, I definitely give the bump to Price. So outside the elite pitchers, what are you thinking for pitching?
Outside of those 2 guys, I think you have a few options. Not as much on DraftKings, but on some other sites. This is not me being a homer, but I really like Jaime Garcia tonight, especially 6,200 on FanDuel. That's a steal for him. I would argue he's been right there with Michael Wacha as the second best pitcher on the Cardinals since he's come back. He's fully healthy. He looks like his 2010, 2011 self again, after basically missing the majority of 2 seasons with injury. If you look at his stats for the full years of 2010, 2011, very good numbers all around. And I posted his stats and all the stuff I wrote up today. I believe his strikeout to walk ratio in his 6 starts is something like 32-5. He's not walking anybody. He's attacking hitters. And 5 out of his 6 starts, he's posted really solid numbers. Had a tough outing against the Royals, but other than that, he's been great. The Phillies have a lot of left-handed batters. Garcia neutralizes lefties very well, so not worried about him getting beaten by guys like Utley and Howard, although Howard does have some career success, very good career success against the Cardinals. I think Garcia matches up very, very well with this Phillies lineup and all the lefties that they have. So on sites where he's still really cheap, I like him tonight. On my one FanDuel Survivor team that I have left, I'm actually not taking Price or Strasburg over there tonight. I'm taking Garcia. He allows you to get some of those bats from the game in Coors Field. And just the price tag he's almost half of those elite guys on FanDuel tonight. So I think he's a great play. I think he's in play on DraftKings as well at 8,800, but I don't think he's a must roster or anything like that over there. In that same price range, you have James Shields. If you're not on board with Garcia, you want to take a little bit bigger name. I know the Mariners generally struggle a little bit more against left-handers than righties, but they really haven't been hitting anybody lately. And Shields has kind of picked it up a little bit after a slow start. I know his last start wasn't that great. But in the matchup at home against the Mariners, that's a tough park to hit in as well. I think James Shields is a relatively safe option kind of for a mid-range price tag. If you want to go a little bit lower, I know I've heard some people blurbing Henderson Alvarez today. A little bit risky, but these days it's never a problem to target a pitcher against the Mets. I wish he'd strike out a few more guys, but I think he's solid if you want to go low end at pitching. And then also some people that have been mentioning Jared Cosart, because if you look at that Rays lineup tonight, it's awful. So I don't mind him for cheap as well. So those are kind of the two mid-range guys and two cheaper guys that I would look at tonight.
Yeah, I think that's more than fair. I'll echo sentiments on two guys. Like Jaime Garcia a lot tonight. I think that he's in a good spot. The big boppers on Philly are left-handed, so you get a big benefit there. And in addition, like you said, he's been pitching extremely well, and his price is certainly depressed around the industry. I also am on the Alvarez train. I think that there's certainly risk, like you alluded to, but I also think that there's some upside there. He's done well versus the Cubs in the past, so I like him. And I think he's overall a pretty nice option, pretty cheap on our sponsored DraftKings. Let's move to the position players. We'll start at catcher. I think Lucroy is the number one guy just with the Coors Field park bump. Obviously, if it was versus a lefty, he'd be hands down number one. Not nearly as good versus righties, but still, I think at Coors Field, he's in such a good spot. Rockies probably won't use left-handed relievers often, but even the event they do, he gets a really nice at bat there. So he's my number one. What are your thoughts on him and the rest of the position?
Yeah, I think he's definitely the number one guy. The question is 5,400 on DraftKings for Jonathan Lucroy. I never thought I'd see the day. He hit 2 homers the other day, but not generally a 30-homer type guy. So I think that the fade might be the play on him on DraftKings. Now, not on other sites, but certainly batting third in between Ryan Braun and Carlos Gomez is a great place to be. So I'm not going to argue with you if you decide you want to take him. And if you go cheap at one of your pitcher spots and you can easily fit him in, then I think that's fine. If you want to go down a little bit lower, I mean, if you want to take the other side of that game, Rosario has not had a good year for the Rockies, but Marco Estrada has basically been a home run batting practice machine lately. Allows a ton of homers, and matching up with that Rockies offense in Coors Field does not seem like it will be the cure for that. So assuming Rosario's in there, I don't see the Rockies lineup yet, and he might be in the 7th spot where is he in there?
Batting fifth. Yep.
Oh, he's batting fifth. All right, if he's batting fifth, I think he's a great play tonight, especially on sites where he's a little bit cheaper. I mean, on DraftKings, he's 1,400 cheaper than Lucroy is. So if you're going for upside, I mean, obviously he's got the pop. And against Estrada, I think it's a perfect matchup for the Rockies to run into a couple of homers tonight. So I think he's fine. Wouldn't be a night without recommending Derek Norris against the lefty Felix Doubront coming back to pitch tonight. Norris's numbers are just insane against left-handed pitching at 4-something WOBA, and I wrote those all in my article today. So, he's batting in the middle of the order for the A's again tonight, as he usually does against left-handers. I think he's fine at that price. He's 4K on DraftKings if you want to go there. I really don't think it's a night to go too far down at catcher. I mean, you can punt. There's guys that are 2,500 that are starting. Hundley is one, and Holiday for the Tigers is starting tonight. If you want a punt catcher, the only other mid-range option that I like is Brian McCann with that short porch and right at Yankee Stadium and a decent matchup tonight. I know everyone was on him last night because he had a big game the night before. He's just been so inconsistent this year. He's pretty hard to trust, but the price tag, $3,500, is a really nice price tag on him against a middling right-handed starter. So I think if you want to go mid-range, he's a decent enough bargain. But for sure, I think you'll see a lot of people, and as you will at every position, you'll see people on that Colorado game pretty heavy tonight.
Yeah, I think you're totally right on all those guys. I like McCann as well. Definitely the Colorado catchers I think are in play. I don't know if Joe Mauer's still eligible catcher anywhere, but if he is, he'd be another good option. And I like Iannetta as well. Not sure if you had mentioned him, but I also like Iannetta at catcher. Moving to first base, this is the one time I really am going to go batter versus pitcher. Batter versus pitcher is not my favorite stat at all, but this is just too hard to ignore. Paul Goldschmidt is my number one first baseman. It is what it is. He's got what I don't even know the exact numbers, but I know he's got like 8 or 9 extra base hits, 7 home runs, like 24 at bats for Lincecum. That's that it's at some point it is just way too much to ignore, and I think that he's clearly the #1 first baseman. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and that includes, I believe, 2 games already this year. I know he homered the first time they faced each other this season. Back then his BVP was 9 for 18 with 5 homers, and now he's up to 7 homers. So I think he's going to be the highest owned guy tonight. And even if you're not a believer in BVP, you could still just take the matchup on its face, and it's a decent. Lincecum's not the pitcher that he once was. The game is in Arizona, which is a very nice hitter's park, as opposed to being in San Francisco, which is a pitcher's park, especially at night. So even if you weren't a believer in BVP, you could still make a case for Goldschmidt tonight. So if you're not into BVP, but you kind of have your doubts, just pretend like you're making the pick without it being because of that. I mean, I think the matchup in and of itself, that's probably part of the reason why the BVP is so good in this case, is just because it's a good matchup for him. And don't think that Lincecum doesn't know those numbers as Goldschmidt's going up there. So that's another factor. I think this will be the play more so than most nights where you see a lot more people play that angle. So if you're into GPP, I don't think that the fade is necessarily a bad move here. If you think he's going to be, what's your guess as far as ownership? Let's say DraftKings GPP, a middle of the road GPP, like a $27 GPP or something. What's your guess on his ownership tonight?
Probably like 15%, maybe 20%, maybe 20, because everyone loves BVP. But the one thing that is nice in terms of keeping his ownership down is he's absurdly expensive pretty much everywhere. So it's harder for a guy who's really, really expensive, especially when there's 2 elite pitchers on the mound, to be really, really heavily owned. You can see guys break the 30, 40, even 50% barrier when they're dirt cheap or just too good of a value. But the one thing about Goldschmidt tonight is that he's just so expensive. I know on FanDuel it's ridiculous. I mean, he's 5,300. The next most expensive is 46. So the gap there is just absolutely immense. I'm going to pull up here on DraftKings.
It's 54 on DraftKings.
Yeah, I was going to say 54. I just didn't want to be wrong. So 54 is expensive for sure. I mean, it's not break the bank. I mean, obviously it's elite expensive, but on FanDuel you really have to make a ton of sacrifices to fit him in. If you play him on DraftKings, he's the one guy you'd spend up on. You'd have to make some sacrifices elsewhere, but he's as expensive as some of these other top guys. So I think he's an elite play tonight. Another guy I really like is Justin Morneau for the Rockies. I think he's obviously Rockies homer here, but I think he's right up there as a top play. And then one other pick I'll give out that I'm really high on, FanDuel specific, is Joe Mauer at the min price. I don't know why his price just consistently goes down there. I don't know why they have certain guys so cheap, like Pence was the other day, but he's 2,200 min price, batting third today for Minnesota, who I think has a chance to put up some runs.
Yeah, I agree on the Twins. I think they're in a decent spot against Noesi tonight. A couple other guys. I agree on Morneau. I think he's a great buy, especially on FanDuel tonight. He's pretty cheap. If you're playing on Draft Street, I'll give you a specific pick for over there. Adrian Gonzalez is like $5K on Draft Street. Now that's with a $100K cap. So I think he's a solid buy over there. I believe they're facing Kennedy. I think Kennedy's pitching for San Diego tonight. So it's not like they're facing a lefty, which is where you generally see Adrian Gonzalez a little bit cheaper. And Kennedy is pitching for the Padres tonight. So I think Gonzalez is a good play over there. If I was going to pivot off of Goldschmidt, now I've seen some people say 50-60% ownership for Goldschmidt tonight. That's a little bit crazy. I don't think you're going to see that many people, especially at a position with as many options as first base has. I don't think in a normal GPP you're going to see Goldschmidt at 50 or 60%. Now, will he be at 50 or 60% in some 10-man double-ups? Yes, but not in a 900-man GPP or something like that. But if you wanted to play the fade on him and take another elite top guy, I think Jose Abreu might be that guy with his home run upside against Ricky Nolasco, who's been kind of terrible to say the least this season. So if I was going to go super high price, not for a guy named Goldschmidt, I think Abreu would be that guy tonight. I think he's a good GPP guy.
Yeah, I totally agree with all that. I think that, there's so many options. First base, all year long, has just been a position that just has so much flexibility. You can go a million different ways, and there's really not nearly as many bad picks as you would think. So, yeah, and I just want to give a shout out to Bronx 4SB. Yeah, no, I'm not going to the game tonight. I'm playing golf, so sorry, but we will definitely catch a beer here at some point. I go to probably 50% of the home Rockies games at least, so make it down another game. I can even get you a ticket if you want, and we can catch a beer at that time. So let's move to second base here. Second base is an interesting position. Scooter month kind of continues. He's in a great spot tonight, but man, his price has really gone up. Thoughts on him and then kind of the rest of the position?
Yeah, it's pretty hard for me to fall in love with him at that price. I think he's probably one of the safer fades from that game. I know he's shown a little bit more pop lately, but he's generally not a home run guy. I don't know. It's just his price has gone up so much that I don't think I can justify him over some of the other options that are at that price range. Again, another guy where I'm not going to fault you if you do, but if you're trying to stack up Brewers tonight, if you're trying to stack up Brewers on DraftKings with Lucroy at 5,400, Scooter at 4,100, and then Carlos Gomez and Ryan Braun are both in the over 5K range. Just put to bed your thoughts of rostering David Price or Steven Strasburg if you want to stack the Brewers. So that's the decision you got to weigh. If you want to do that, certainly for cash games you can plug a guy or two in. But if I'm doing that, I'm going to do my best to get a guy like Braun or a guy like Lucroy or a guy like Gomez as opposed to Scooter. He's not going to be the one Brewer that I'm trying to fit in my lineup. So if you're stacking them up and you're going cheaper at your pitching spot, sure, that's I think he makes total sense there. As the leadoff guy, you don't really want to leave him out. But I'm generally not going there at second base tonight. I think you've got a couple of plays. Dustin Pedroia, always very solid against left-handed pitching. Hit a home run against Scott Kazmir last night, and tonight gets to face Brad Mills. Did you see this story that Brad Mills got traded to the A's for $1?
No, I did not see that story. That's pretty awesome. I looked at bag of bats stories, too. I know there was a trade once for a guy for a bag of bats. So.
Yeah, the Brewers traded Brad Mills to the A's for $1. From everything I read, this is a true story. It kind of flew under the radar, but I was trying to look up some info on Brad Mills, so I just Googled him today, and the top 5 stories were all about him getting traded for $1. So he was in the minor leagues, and the A's are calling him up to start tonight. I mean, he's kind of a journeyman left-hander, so I don't know a whole lot about him, but I can't imagine that he's going to blow anybody away. So Pedroia against a lefty, sure, I think he's a solid option. Again, another guy who seems relatively cheap on FanDuel. I believe he's 3,200 there. He's 46 on DraftKings, so he's probably one of the guys, if I'm spending up at second base tonight, he's probably the one I'm going to go for. Don't mind Kipnis against Rick Porcello, but I'm not totally in love with that play. He's okay if you want to use him. I think Howie Kendrick's in a decent spot. Joe Saunders, although he's been pretty good to this point this season, generally a guy who struggles against right-handed hitters. Kendrick's batting 5th tonight behind Josh Hamilton, so I think he's probably one of the safer Angels bats to target if you want to target them against Joe Saunders. Not a ton, I don't think, in the lower range at second base tonight. I mean, Tommy La Stella is leading off for the Braves again tonight, but they're facing Strasburg, so it's hard to get in love with that. And a whole lot of the other punt plays just really aren't, they're either not in the lineup tonight or they're batting 8th or 9th. I still don't, I must not be scrolling down far enough for that Rockies. It's almost impossible for me to use the internet when we're on Google Hangouts. That's why I'm constantly looking at my phone, because it's easier for me to check pricing and stuff when we're on Google Hangouts. It's about 15 times faster than trying to scroll through the doggone lineups page. I don't see the Rockies lineup on the site.
I'll give it to you real quick. It's Blackman, Dickerson, Tulo, Morneau, Rosario, Barnes, Rutledge, LeMahieu, and Bergman.
Okay, their lineup actually came up pretty early. There it was down towards the bottom. So I was going to say if Culberson was in there, he might be a punt play, but he's not. So and LeMahieu, I believe, is still fairly expensive on DraftKings.
Yeah, and batting 8th, it just kind of a stay away.
What about is Rutledge? Is he only third base eligible there? I think I don't see him at second base, so they must have him third or short or something. I didn't know if he's one of those multi-position guys.
I would think he would be. I actually don't know to be.
He's 30. Well, he's 3,700 anyhow. He's third base. Might be shortstop as well, but he's 3,700. So it's not like any of those guys are just going to be available as cheap punts. If you're looking for that in the Rockies game, I think you're out of luck tonight.
Yeah, I agree with all the things you just said. So I'm looking over here at some lineups and other things. At second base, I think that Kendrick is probably right up there as my number one option. Also really like Scooter Gennett overall. I agree with your sentiments there. And then after that, I'm not too in love with anybody. I'm just looking at a list here. Man, it's pretty brutal after that, to be honest. I can see the merit that maybe playing Brandon Phillips, where he's still really cheap. He's someone that I do think's in a good spot, assuming that weather stays fine. So that's really it for me at second base. I'm not diversifying too much unless I'm doing a team stack. So there's what is there. We'll say Dozier is a nice GPP play. I don't think as many people will be on him, and I do expect the Twins to score, like I alluded to earlier. So he's not versus a lefty or anything, but still, Noisi's just a terrible pitcher, so I like him as well. Shortstop, Tulowitzki, fire him up. There it is. There's my analysis. You take the rest.
He's back at home, so Peter is licking his chops to get some Tulo tonight. Certainly probably the top guy back. Anytime the Rockies come back, to play at home, you'll find most of them a little bit cheaper. I think some of the sites are finally starting to price that Coors Field factor in. But Tulo is probably your top guy tonight. If you don't want to go there, which as you would say, I'm not sure why you wouldn't want to go there. I actually don't think there's a ton at shortstop tonight, but a couple guys, I mentioned the Red Sox guys that always hit left-handed pitching very well. Xander Bogaerts is a guy. He's slowed down a little bit lately, but always very good against left-handers. His price is still down a little bit on some sites, so I don't mind him if you want to go there. Also, I really like Alexi Ramirez. He's a guy who I think he has hits in 8 straight games now. The whole White Sox offense is clicking a little bit better since Jose Abreu's come back. But Ramirez's price kind of towards the end of May, I guess, maybe early June, started to slip a little bit. He went into a little bit of a funk. But hits in 8 straight games. He's cheap, and he's facing Ricky Nolasco, as I mentioned earlier. I think some of those White Sox guys could be in a decent spot if you want to take one or two of them. Just $3,700 on DraftKings. I think he's a great play at that price. If you want to totally punt, there are some options down there. Hechavarria is batting second, I believe, for the Marlins against the Mets tonight. So pretty good punt spot for him. 2,900 on, or 28 or 2,900 on DraftKings, and batting second. So he would be my punt.
Okay.
He's
Tulo.
Also third base eligible if you want Tulo at shortstop. You can punt Hechavarria at third base.
And Tulo's not as ridiculous as he used to be price-wise, too. So, the one nice thing, too, about Estrada is he kind of has some reverse splits. So I'm all in on Tulowitzki.
Estrada just gives up homers. He doesn't care who he's facing. He just
exactly.
wants to give up some homers.
Tulo at home, man. He's good. He's too good. I haven't been playing him nearly as much just because the price has gotten absurd, and obviously I know he wouldn't sustain what happened in the beginning of the season, but in all honesty, I do think he's a pretty nice play at any position tonight. I think he's an elite hitter tonight. I have him ranked as one of the top players overall, so my Tulo love continues, and I think he's a good play.
Let me tee up third base for you. What do you make of Josh Donaldson tonight?
I mean, everyone's going to be on him, I think.
Do you think so? Despite this, he's like 0 for 1,000. I'm exaggerating, but he's been in a horrible slump.
He's in a slump for sure. I just think that's driven down his price a decent amount, and it's him versus a lefty at home, wind's blowing out. I think people will be on him.
Yeah.
One last thing to real quick. The main reason I think that most people will be on him is because so many people have been rewarded by him in the past. I know that there's the recency bias to how have you treated me lately, but I do think that people will be really on him just because of what he's done in the past. And he is starting to heat up a little bit. He's getting singles here. I think he has like a 5-game hitting streak now. Obviously, no power, no extra base hits or anything, so he's not doing anything for you in GPPs or anything like that. But at least he's making some contact. And I just think at third base, there's a couple different options. I think we'll talk about him here in a second, but I think he's going to be a pretty popular pick.
Yeah, I think he's the guy that most people will gravitate to tonight, especially with upside. But on FanDuel, I don't think anybody will be more highly owned than Aramis Ramirez. 3,100 over there. That's just too cheap for a solid hitter in a very good lineup playing in Coors Field. So he's one of the lock and load players over there tonight. 5K on DraftKings, certainly I think on DraftKings that Donaldson will probably be a little bit more highly owned, but those are the two guys that I think a lot of people will gravitate towards tonight. If you're spending on your third baseman, and I don't, to to me, that you're going to see a lot of those two guys. I do like the matchup that Matt Carpenter has against A.J. Burnett. Burnett has some terrible numbers against the Cardinals. Now, I'm lukewarm on the Cardinal bats because every time everyone seems to like them, they just have not done anything all year. If you're using the "what have you done for me lately" logic, nobody's going to be on the Cardinals probably the rest of the year because every time they're in a good spot, they've stunk up the joint. They got shut down by Buchanan for the Phillies last night. It was very strange. They looked horrible at the plate. So Matt Carpenter is really the only guy I'm on. Maybe Matt Adams if you're going somewhere else at first base. But there's just so many options at first. At third base, there are fewer options. So if you're not on Ramirez and you're not on Donaldson, I think Carpenter's a nice pivot with some upside against A.J. Burnett. Since the Cardinals do have a solid history against them, I think Carpenter leading off is in a decent spot. And that's really all I'm going with at third base, outside of a few shares of Connor Gillespie. He's batting third and relatively cheap. But those are the guys I have exposure to at third.
Yeah, I'm on two guys tonight. I'm on the first two guys you talked about. Aramis on FanDuel is just way too cheap. And then Donaldson, it's been nice that he hasn't been tearing the cover off the ball just because his price comes down. Elite spot for him. I'm not worried at all about the slump, really, to be honest. So I think he's a great play. And then any other exposure I have at third baseman is just generally going to be players on stacks. And so I agree with you on Gillespie. I agree with you on Carpenter. I think both those guys are good plays. I just don't think they're nearly as good of plays as Aramis and Donaldson. And tonight I'm just not going to get too cute. But you do bring up a valid point. Or not even bring up, but you do point out that there's going to be a lot of ownership on those two guys. So if you are high on someone else at third base, I think it's a great night to pepper them in quite a bit because if those two guys both don't have good games or both of them don't have a good day, you're in a great spot in a tournament because I think they're both going to be extremely heavily owned, especially over there on FanDuel. So let's move to outfield and then we can take some questions, guys. Maybe do a pick five here. Let's first start off with your top guy overall. Who would you, if you had to pick one guy, no price, if there's just a pick 'em. You have all the outfielders available. Who would it be?
It'd probably be Braun. It's close. I mean, I for the life of me this year have not been able to peg Braun and Gomez correctly. Braun's been a guy that's frustrated a lot of people, but I would not be surprised to see that change tonight. I mean, the Rockies have a guy that's pitching who admittedly is not one of their top guys. He's not as hyped as Butler or anything like that, but they've just been so decimated in that rotation. It's almost got to be a guy from the game in Coors. I mean, that total's approaching 11. The Rockies outfielders, while I think they're great options, if we're just choosing a number one guy, I think it's got to be one of the higher priced guys from Milwaukee. So I'll take Braun. So that means if everyone else is out there, probably just go ahead and take Gomez instead.
I mean, I pretty much agree. I think it's a total toss-up. We had to flip a coin. I think we had two of the best players in baseball today, both in great spots, Trout and Braun. Probably two of the top 3 or 4 hitters overall in the league. I know Braun's dealing with a little bit of an issue with his thumb, so it does zap a little bit of his power. But regardless, it's Coors Field, and it's two elite players. So those are my two top guys. Right after that, though, I think there's a lot of merit to, even guys like Blackman and Dickerson on the Rockies. I think the park bump really helps them out. Also really like Josh Hamilton. I think he's not he's an interesting play. The reason I say I don't think he's an elite guy, I don't think many people are going to be on him tonight, but I like him a lot because I think that's going to be a high-scoring game for the Angels, and I think he's a contrarian play. So what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, he's definitely a contrarian play. I mean, Saunders is generally really tough on left-handed bats.
Yep.
So, but he's got homer upside against anybody if he makes contact. So for a GPP, I can see him as a low ownership guy that gives you a boost tonight. If we're just specifically talking DraftKings, Trout is 6,100 over there and Braun is 5,900. Those are insanely high price tags. I mean, those two guys are both more expensive than Tulowitzki, so. It's hard to fit them in. If I was picking a guy based on DraftKings pricing, Gomez is 800 cheaper than Trout and 600 cheaper than Braun, so I'd probably take him there. As far as my top option when factoring price into account, and I think you're going to see a lot of people gravitate towards some of those guys. We really haven't mentioned many of the Yankees bats today, but you could make hay with some of those guys tonight. Ubaldo Jimenez has been just awful lately. He has had no control. I mean, I think he had one start. He didn't make it out of the third inning and had like 6 walks or something like that. So especially the left-handed outfielders for the Yankees, guys like Gardner and Ellsbury, I think they're in decent spots. And I really do like that 1-2 punch in the Rockies order tonight. I'm sure you're probably more aware of this than most, but Blackman's splits versus righties and lefties are very extreme, and his splits at home versus road are very extreme. So when he's at home against a righty, his splits are very, very good. So Blackman in the leadoff spot, this is the time you want to take him. And Dickerson's been solid all year, finally getting more playing time with Cargo out, but he should have been getting more playing time even before that because he's been one of their better hitters outside of Blackman and Tulowitzki this season. So good to see him in there in the 2 spot tonight. I think both of those guys make good plays, and even Barnes if you want to go a little bit cheaper, especially on the sites where he's still super cheap. My contrarian play for the night, again, I think a lot of people are going to be on those the Coors Field game, is a guy that he's pretty cheap everywhere. I think he's 4,300 on DraftKings. He's in the 3s on FanDuel. Always pretty solid against right-handed pitching, and that's Shin-Soo Choo. I know Garrett Richards has been good this year, but still inconsistent at times. And Choo's a guy that can bring you some upside, when he's on his game. He hasn't been great this season, but I think tonight, you mentioned you like that game to have some runs, so I think Choo could be a nice contrarian play for a tournament tonight.
Yeah, I really love Chu. Always do in those scenarios. I want to talk about Hamilton just for another quick second here. I know Saunders has been very, very good versus lefties historically. Not convinced he's done okay this year, but he's also got blown up a bit. I'm not convinced about his effectiveness going forward, and because of that, I think that the Angels are going to score a lot of runs. I have a feeling that he's going to get booted out of the game relatively early. And that's not a good reason to play someone for cash games. I would never, ever in a million years recommend Hamilton for cash games, but I do think he's an elite tournament to play today just because he's going to be more contrarian and because I think they're going to get to the bullpen. And I think in Texas there, I think he's going to – I just think he's going to go yard tonight. I have a hunch there. So outside of Hamilton, outside of the guys you named before, I think you brought up a lot of good names. I think the Rockies guys, like you talked about, are in really, really good spots. Really a big fan of Blackman today. Another guy who I'm high on for the price industry-wide is Cowgill for the Angels, batting leadoff. I really think, like I talked about just there, the Angels are going to score runs, so I like him at a discounted price. And then in addition to that, I think all the Brewers guys are good plays as well. The park shift there is just so big for them. And other outfielders I like are the Yankees ones. I really like Ellsbury tonight. I think he's an elite play. And in addition to that, I would say Gardner's a good play, not an elite play. I do like him, but I like guys. I think there's so many guys tonight that have a chance to hit a home run that I'm a little bit higher on those guys. He definitely has value, can get you steals, but on a night where it just seems like there's going to be a lot of scoring, a lot of runs, I want that upside in the outfield because so many guys have good matchups. Let's do this. I'll fire up a pick 5 real quick, and guys, you can fire up some chats. I did see a couple of things here. Scooter or Rendon? I'm definitely on Scooter. What about you?
Yeah, I would say Scooter's the play there. People ask about Adam Eaton as well.
Yeah, Adam Eaton's he's a good play. What do you think?
I think he's all right. I mean, I think he's still in the 2s on FanDuel, 28, 2,900. Leading off against Nolasco, can't go wrong with that.
Yeah, definitely agree. One other question I just saw here. We had, let's see, sorry. There's a 2 for 2 that I thought was pretty straightforward. Might have already gotten answered in the chat, and it might have just disappeared for me. But it was, here it is. Matt Adams and Longoria or Aramis and Morneau. I'm going Aramis Morneau all day. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, you got to play the Coors guys there. Despite my love for Matt Adams, yeah, I think that one's pretty straightforward.
Okay, perfect. I think that's straightforward too. So go ahead, guys. Fire up some questions here. I'm going to get the pick 5 up as well. Cards, real quick. Any big plans for the weekend outside of trying to sell the house?
Yeah, we're having a big, huge, way too large garage sale tomorrow, which I'm convinced is more trouble than it's worth. But the big benefit of that is getting some crap out of this place. Stuff the kids have outgrown and whatnot. So that it won't be too much of a hassle when we move. So big garage sale tomorrow. The weather's supposed to be nice, like 85 and sunny. So that's going to be from 8 to 2, and hopefully we can clear some stuff out of here. But we're going to be setting up for that tonight and doing that tomorrow. So.
Cool. All right, well, we got a good pick 5 here. We got stuff that we've talked about already a lot today. First one's Strasburg versus Price.
Yeah, in the pick 5 type of game, you've got to go for the safer pick there, and this would be an example where I think Price is the better play.
I definitely agree, and I'm on Price as well. Tulowitzki versus Trout. I just said Trout's number 1, but I'm going Homer here.
You can't. You could never live with yourself if you recommend anyone.
Even though statistically it's probably Trout, but I can't. I go Tulo.
I will too. I like the matchup against Estrada tonight.
Here's another really good one. Curious your thoughts here. Ryan Braun versus Paul Goldschmidt.
Wow.
These are good ones.
I'm somewhat of a BVP guy, but tonight is a night where I just feel like so many people are going to be on it that it might be worth it to not be. And I just love that game in Coors so much tonight. I'll take Braun, but that's close.
It's close. I'll go Braun too, only because he's batting a little higher in the order. Road team here. I'll give the slight edge to Braun to get a little more opportunity. And I do think Goldschmidt's very likely to homer, but Braun, I can't see him not getting on base multiple times and being in a position to score runs and or knock them in.
Yeah.
Next one's Ellsbury versus Cespedes. What are your thoughts there?
I'll take Ellsbury there. I like those Yankees bats tonight. I think Cespedes will be a popular option too against Felix Doubront. But let's not forget who Cespedes is. He's a guy with a ton of power, but he hits about 250. Ellsbury is a guy who can get on base, occasionally hit for power, but he can steal you a base if he gets on. Jimenez walks a lot of guys, so he could get a walk and steal a base. I think Ellsbury is a safer play there.
Totally agree. I'm on Ellsbury by a large margin there in this format. Puig versus Nelson Cruz.
Interesting. Two guys we didn't talk about too much at all.
Either of them. Yeah, I mean, Ian Kennedy at home has been good. A tough matchup for him, and then Cruz going against a righty. These are both perfect examples of contrarian plays for tournaments. Both guys who have elite upside anytime they're playing. Not ideal matchups, and people that guys won't be on, but they're certainly high upside. So that's one way to look at it. But
I like Puig's upside a little bit more. I think if Cruz was facing a lefty, he'd be the easy choice. Kuroda has some extreme splits. He's really tough on right-handed bats, not very good against lefties. So I'll take Puig there with his upside. I know that's a tough park to homer in at night, but he's another guy who can steal you a base or two and generally find his way on. So I'll take Puig, but I'm not as confident in that one.
Yeah, I'll take Puig too. I just think he's a more consistent player. Cruz gets all the value out of the home run, and he hits most of his home runs. Well, percentage-wise, he's more prone to hitting a home run versus a lefty, so I'm going to take Puig in this situation. Let's see here. We got a couple questions that I saw. Beltran and Jay Bruce, both 31 on FanDuel. I'm going to take Jay Bruce. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll take Jay Bruce. Beltran hasn't shown much this year at all. He really has looked pretty old at the plate. Kind of glad the Cardinals got rid of him when they did. So I'll take Bruce there.
Okay, and I forgot I was supposed to do this all day. So we're going to spend the last minute and a half of the show. We'll go crazy here. Ducky Succumbs has the tournament of shame that we need to get. So if you have it, Ducky, while we're
either Peter's feed went out or my feed went out. I'll jab just in case it was him and not me. Piggybacking on what he was saying, Ducky Succumbs with his Tournament of Shame. It's a really cool thing that's kind of evolved over the past 4 or 5 weeks. I know Tip and Pick was a great ambassador for that when he was the Shamey. And they've upped the ante a little bit. There's a Legends Series ticket on DraftKings at stake in Ducky's Tournament of Shame. So if he's in the chat, we'll have him post the link. Otherwise, I can grab that for you here as soon as this show is done. Again, I believe the winner of this tournament gets a Legend Series ticket on DraftKings, and the person that finishes last gets a nice little shaming, which I believe this week is relatively tame compared to the last few from what I've heard. A funny video or photo that will be posted, something like that. Ducky's blog always does a great job of breaking down the Tournament of Shame, and it's really turned into a cool thing. So, if you get your chance, dive on into that tonight, and we'll make sure the link gets posted in the chat here. So, with that, if you're still with me but not with Peter, we'll call an end to our Grinders Live show for this Friday, June 20th. Thanks, as always, for joining us. Good luck in your games out there tonight, and we'll see you later, Grinders.